Welcome to the deep dive. We're going to try to unpack some pretty weird stuff happening in Morris County, New Jersey.
Okay.
So imagine, you look up at the night sky, right? And instead of stars, you see, glowing geometric shapes doing things that...
Whoa.
I know, right? It's like they're breaking the laws of physics or something.
That's wild.
Yeah, and this isn't just, some small town thing either. This
Yeah.
is blown up. It's, national news now.
Really?
Yeah. The hashtag NJShapes is trending everywhere. The
Oh.
Daily Ledger even ran a headline about it. UFOs? Question mark.
Wow. So even the local papers are taking it seriously.
Oh yeah, and it's not just them. Even the New York Times picked up the story.
The New York Times. Wow, that's crazy.
I know, right? It's like everyone's trying to figure out what's going on.
And then there's that message that people keep talking about, prepare. Prepare for what? It's
I know, it's creepy, right?
Yeah,
It's like something out of a movie.
definitely.
So to help us sort through all this, you gave me a bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah, I did.
Eyewitness accounts, news articles, expert opinions, the whole shebang.
It's a lot to go through.
It is. But hey, that's what we're here for. Let's
Yep.
dive in. All right. So it seems like it all started with these weird lights in the sky,
Right.
just after dusk. But we're not talking like your average twinkling stars here.
Gotcha.
These were shapes, actual glowing shapes, making these crazy patterns, triangles, hexagons, spirals, like you wouldn't believe.
That's crazy. What kind of shapes are we talking about?
All sorts. And here's the really freaky part. All of this was happening in total silence.
Silence.
Yeah, witnesses are saying that the shapes were moving with this precision that's just not normal. No plane or drone we know of could do that.
You know that silence thing
Yeah.
that keeps coming up in the reports you sent?
Yeah.
It's a pretty strange detail. A lot of the witnesses, they talk about this eerie stillness, like the usual sounds of the night just disappear.
Huh.
It's
Interesting.
almost as if the shapes are somehow messing with the environment. You
Yeah.
know? Like we don't understand how yet. But
Yeah, that's definitely weird. Okay, so let's talk about Clara Reed for a second.
Okay.
She's the local journalist, remember?
Yeah, I remember reading about her.
At first, she thought this whole thing was like a hoax or some kind of drone prank.
A trank. Really?
Yeah. She even wrote a couple of articles debunking UFO sightings.
Makes sense. I mean, she's a journalist, right? They're all about the facts.
Exactly. But then she sees the shapes for herself and everything changes for her.
Oh, wow. So she went from skeptic to believer.
You could say that. It's
Yeah.
like her whole world got flipped upside down.
So what happened? What did she see?
We'll get to that, don't worry. But it's pretty clear that seeing those shapes firsthand was like a turning point for her.
I bet. It's one thing to read about it, but to actually see it with your own eyes.
Right. It's like suddenly all those stories she dismissed, they become real.
I can only imagine.
So anyway, this small town mystery, it explodes, becomes national news, major outlets pick it up, the New York Times, the Washington Post.
Wow.
And then the government gets involved, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the FAA, everyone wants answers.
So what did they say?
Well, their official statements are basically nothing to see here, folks. Just some misidentified objects.
Misidentified objects. Come
I
on.
know, right? But that's the official line. But the eyewitness accounts, those tell a very different story.
What do they say?
They're describing the movements as impossibly fluid, eerily intelligent. These things are defying our understanding of technology.
That's a huge discrepancy between what the government's saying and what people are actually seeing.
It is. And it's this gap that makes the whole thing even more intriguing. You have this clash between the official narrative and lived experience.
Right. It's classic. What aren't they telling us?
Exactly. And Clara, being the journalist that she is, she's not satisfied with the official explanation.
So she digs deeper.
She does. She starts combing through all these witness reports, and she notices something really interesting.
What's that?
Whenever these shapes show up, there are reports of radio signal disruptions.
Radio signal.
Well, yeah, static bursts, strange tones. It's these shapes are messing with our technology in a very specific way.
Okay, now that is getting interesting.
Right. It's they're not just visual, they're actually interacting with our world.
It's like leaving a fingerprint, but a technological one.
I like that. A technological fingerprint. And this is what leads Clara to seek out Dr. Ravi Shah.
Who's that?
He's an astrophysicist.
Oh.
And apparently he's got a bit of a reputation for looking into unexplained phenomena.
So he's the guy you call when things get weird.
Pretty much. And when Clara shows him the evidence, especially those radio interference patterns, his response is pretty thought-provoking.
What does he say?
Well, he points out that maybe we shouldn't be focusing on just identifying the shapes.
Okay.
He thinks the formations themselves, the movements, the patterns, they might not be random.
What do you mean?
He has this theory that what if these shapes are a form of language?
A language. Whoa.
I know, right? It's like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it's happening right here in New Jersey.
That's wild. So we've got these shapes. They're messing with our tech. And now they might be trying to talk to us.
That's where we're at. And it gets even crazier. Trust me.
Okay. I'm ready for more.
Good, because we've only just scratched the surface.
Okay. Let's get to it.
All right, so next up, we're going to talk about what happens when those shapes get a little too close for comfort and what Clara discovers when she starts digging into those radio signals.
I'm hooked.
Me too. Let's do it.
So it looks like things are going to get even weirder from here.
Oh!
Yeah, remember all those stories about Clara's nighttime stakeouts?
Oh, yeah. She was, like, obsessed with those shapes, right?
Totally. And this is where her, like, journalist instincts really kick in. She sets up this observation point.
Like a stakeout.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she brings all her gear camera, notepad, and a radio.
A radio? What for?
To monitor those weird signal disruptions. Remember, she's not letting any detail slip by.
That's dedication. I
Yeah.
can't even imagine just, like, sitting there in the dark waiting for something that might not even show up.
Oh, I bet the anticipation was killing her. But then just when she's about to give up, boom, the shapes return.
Okay, now I'm picturing this. It's night, super quiet, and then these impossible shapes just appear out of nowhere.
And this time, they get closer than ever before.
Whoa, okay, now that's got to be freaky. Like you're seeing something you can't explain right there in front of you.
Right. It's not just about the shapes themselves, but it's about how we react to them. Clara, this woman who's all about logic and facts, she's facing something that's totally beyond her understanding.
I bet that changes a person.
It does. And as the shapes get closer, her radio starts going haywire.
Yeah.
Static bursts. Weird tones. Just like before. But then something different happens. A voice comes through the static. Just one word. Prepare.
Chills. Dude, literal chills. Okay, so there's this one article you sent me from like a paranormal website.
Yeah.
And they were saying that maybe the shapes were like aliens trying to warn us about an invasion.
Alien invasion. That's a bit much, don't you think?
Probably. But, I mean, it's not totally out there, right? We've got these unexplained shapes, a cryptic message, and a whole lot of unanswered questions.
Okay, I see your point. But based on what we've got so far, there's no real evidence to back up the whole alien invasion thing.
Fair enough. But still, that word prepare, it just hangs there, right? Like, what are we supposed to be preparing for?
Exactly. It's designed to get under our skin, to make us question everything.
And it definitely worked. After Clara's story got out, Morris County went full panic mode.
Really?
Oh, yeah. People were seeing those shapes everywhere. And with no explanation from the government. Well, you can imagine what happened.
Conspiracy theories.
Bingo. It was like a breeding ground for them. Everyone had a different theory about what was going on.
That's understandable, though, when you're faced with something you can't explain. Your mind starts filling in the blanks.
Exactly. And one of the theories that really took off was this thing called Project Blue Beam.
Project Bluebeam.
Yeah, it's this wild idea that the government is using like super advanced tech to fake an alien invasion.
To what? Control people.
That's the theory. It
Yeah.
sounds crazy, right? But a lot of people in Morris County were buying into it.
What plays into those fears we all have about the government hiding things from us.
Right. It's like, we want an explanation, even if it's a crazy one.
Totally. It's like we need to make sense of the world, even when it doesn't make sense.
Exactly. So here we are, a town full of fear, a cryptic message, and a journalist who's determined to get to the bottom of it all. What happens next?
Well, that's where Claire's investigation takes an interesting turn. Remember that recording she got of the voice saying prepare?
Yeah.
She becomes fixated on it. She's convinced that it's not just a warning, but like a clue
Clue to what?
to the whole mystery of the shapes, who's behind them, what they want, why they're here.
Okay, that makes sense. She's
Yeah.
a journalist, right? Solving puzzles is like in her blood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this puzzle's a big one. But before we get into that, I want to go back to Project Bluebeam for a second.
Oh, yeah. Why?
Because even though it might not be true in this case,
Yeah.
it does bring up some interesting questions.
Like what?
Like, how much power does technology have? Can it be used to manipulate us,
Yeah.
to control us?
Whoa, that's deep.
It is. It's something to think about, especially in this day and age where information spreads so fast and it's hard to know what's real and what's not.
So you're saying we should be careful.
I'm saying we should be aware that technology can be used for good and bad. And it's up to us to decide how we use it and how we let it influence us.
That's a good point. So what about Clara? Does she figure out what's going on?
That's for the next part. But let's just say that her investigation uncovers some pretty mind-blowing stuff.
I knew it! All right, let's take a break and then we'll dive into the final chapter of this crazy story. Okay, so we're back. And Clara's got that one word stuck in her head. Prepare.
Right. She's like a dog with a bone.
Totally. But this time it's not just about the word itself, it's about what it represents, the whole mystery of those shapes.
And remember how we talked about those radio disruptions?
Yeah.
Well, Clara starts to see those as more than just interference.
What do you mean?
She thinks there might be a message hidden within the static.
Whoa, like a code.
Exactly. And she's determined to crack it.
So what does she do?
She starts collecting all these recordings of the radio disruptions. Not just her own, but from other witnesses, too.
Smart. That's a lot of data, though.
It is. But Clara's not afraid of a little hard work. She spends days analyzing the recordings, looking for patterns, repetitions, anything that might point to a hidden message.
It's like she's trying to decipher an alien language.
Kind of. And you know what? She finds something.
She does. What is it? Don't tell me it's prepare again.
Nope. It's something way more complex.
Oh.
So within all that static, there's this sequence of tones.
Tones.
Yeah, like musical notes.
Yeah.
But they're super faint, almost hidden.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
So Clara, she isolates these tones, cleans up the recording, and plays it back.
And what does it sound like?
It's not exactly music, but it's not random either. It's a series of distinct sounds arranged in a very specific pattern.
A pattern, like a code.
More like a mathematical formula.
A formula. Whoa, okay, now I'm really lost.
So she takes this recording back to Dr. Shaw, and even he's blown away.
What does he say?
He recognizes the pattern as a complex mathematical equation, something like a fractal.
A fractal.
Yeah, it's like a never-ending pattern that repeats itself at different scales.
Okay, my brain is melting.
Basically, what Dr. Shaw is saying is that the shapes aren't just communicating. They're communicating something incredibly intricate.
So it's not a language. It's math.
It's both. The
Yeah.
math is the language.
Okay, so what does the message say?
That's the million-dollar question. And unfortunately, we don't have the answer.
Oh, man.
But here's what we do know. Those shapes are not random. They're a form of intelligent communication, using technology and math that's way beyond anything we understand.
This whole story is wild. We started with some weird lights in the sky, and now we've got alien math equations.
That's a pretty good example of how the more you dig, the stranger things get.
It is.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us? What's the takeaway from all this?
I think the biggest thing is that we need to be open to the possibility that we don't know everything.
Yeah, that's pretty clear at this point.
There's a whole universe out there, and we're just starting to scratch the surface.
And maybe that's the point of the message, prepare. Not to be afraid, but to be ready. To learn to explore, to accept that there are things out there that we might not understand.
That's a good way to put it. Prepare to be amazed. Prepare to be challenged. Prepare to see the world in a whole new way.
I like that. Well, this has been quite a journey. Thank you so much for helping me unpack all of this.
This is my pleasure.
And to all you listeners out there, keep looking up, stay curious, and never stop asking questions. Who knows what other mysteries are waiting to be discovered?